Have you ever wondered why you keep walking back into the same fire, even though the burn is etched into your bones? Why your hands keep reaching for the very thing that once left you trembling in the dark? There is a strange magnetism to pain that feels familiar not because it is good for you, but because somewhere in your shadow, it belongs to you. The mind does not always crave what heals. Often, it craves what it understands. And what it understands best is the echo of wounds never confronted. A man or woman does not keep choosing the same person, the same chaos, the same silent destroyer, because they are weak. They do it because the psyche clings to patterns, like a drowning hand clings to driftwood even when that driftwood is splintering their skin. Jung knew this well. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is not fate. This is repetition, compulsion, the secret pull of the familiar pain that shaped you long before you had the words to name it. Perhaps once you were a child reaching for love in a house where affection was rationed, where your worth was measured by how small you could make yourself, how silent you could stay. Your nervous system learned that love feels like waiting, that safety feels like walking on a floor that might give way. And now, years later, when you meet someone who mirrors that uncertainty, something inside you whispers, home. But it is not home. It is the shadow replaying the old theater, asking, will you choose differently this time? Will you awaken? Or will you kneel before the same altar of pain and call it devotion? You may think you are choosing them, the lover who disappears, the friend who betrays, the job that drains the marrow from your soul, but in truth, you are choosing the reflection of an ancient wound. And here's the cruel beauty of the human mind. Until you turn inward, until you see the role you are unconsciously playing, the casting will never change. The faces may shift, the scenery may alter, but the script will remain the same. So ask yourself, not with judgment, but with ruthless honesty, what is the need my pain is feeding? What is the story I am afraid to rewrite? For some, the answer will come like a quiet shame. For others, it will roar with rage. But either way, it will demand courage. Not the kind of courage that charges into battle, but the kind that sits alone in a room and meets the shadow without turning away. The kind that refuses to let childhood ghosts write the ending of an adult life. Because here is the truth no one tells you. Healing feels, at first, like betrayal. Betrayal of the people who raised you, of the beliefs that kept you safe, of the identity you built around surviving. And yet, it is the only way forward. To heal is to refuse the poison, even when the poison tastes like home. To say, I will not choose you again. I will not choose this again. Even when your entire body screams for the familiar ache. Pain will always knock at your door. But the day you answer with silence instead of surrender, the cycle begins to break. That is the moment the unconscious loosens its grip. That is the moment you stop being a prisoner of your own patterns. And yet, the breaking of a cycle is not a single moment. It is a series of small deaths. The death of the fantasy that they will change. The death of the belief that suffering proves your worth. The death of the identity forged in endurance, where you wore resilience like armor and mistook it for love. In the language of the psyche, these deaths are acts of liberation. But the ego will not go quietly. It clings to the old ways because the old ways are known, and the known feels safe even when it is suffocating you. That is why the first steps toward freedom are often met with an ache so deep you begin to doubt if leaving the fire was a mistake. The shadow whispers, return. The old pain, personified in familiar faces and familiar silences, calls to you with the comfort of a lullaby. It is here that most falter, because they mistake the pull for proof. Proof that they belong with the one who wounds them. Proof that the job, the habit, the destructive pattern was not so bad after all. But attraction is not always a compass pointing toward truth. Often, it points toward the unresolved. In Jungian thought, the shadow holds what the conscious mind rejects, not only the darkness, but also the power buried beneath it. Every time you refuse to see your own hidden motives, you hand the steering wheel of your life to an unseen driver. That driver knows only one destination, the familiar battlefield. If you truly wish to stop choosing the pain that destroys you, you must learn the art of interruption. Not just pausing when temptation rises, but interrogating it. Ask yourself, what part of me feels at home in this hurt? Who taught me to find beauty in the bruise? The answers will not come clean and polished. They will come raw, with splinters of memory lodged in their edges. And when they do, there will be grief. Grief for the years you lost to people who could not love you. Grief for the version of you who believed that love meant earning it. Grief for the moments you kept silent to keep the peace, only to discover that peace built on silence is just a prettier word for captivity. But grief, unlike despair, is a teacher. It strips you bare, and in that bareness, you find the truth. You were never choosing them. You were choosing the part of yourself that still longed for recognition from a ghost. The moment you see this, the illusion cracks. Their power over you dissolves, not because they changed, but because you have. Still, transformation demands repetition too, but this time, the repetition of boundaries instead of betrayals. Saying no without explanation. Walking away without leaving the door ajar. Rebuilding the architecture of your life so that the rooms that once housed your pain are now filled with your own presence, your own voice, your own unshakable worth. And slowly, the patterns that once owned you begin to fade. The people who mirrored your wound lose their shine. The silence that once haunted you becomes sanctuary. And you start to realize that choosing differently is not an act of loss, but of return not to the home you were born into, but to the home you were always meant to become. But the shadow does not surrender without one last seduction. It will disguise itself as longing, weaving nostalgia into your bloodstream, whispering that maybe the pain wasn't as sharp as you remember. It will call to you in the quiet hours, summoning the scent of their skin, the sound of their voice, the way their presence once filled the room. You will remember the warmth, and your mind, desperate for a sense of belonging, will conveniently blur the moments that cut you open. This is the trick of the unconscious. It edits the past into something almost bearable, so you are tempted to return. But this return is not love, it is regression. It is the psyche's way of avoiding the terrifying openness of unfamiliar peace. You see, chaos may hurt, but it has rules. You know the rhythm of the storm. Peace, on the other hand, feels foreign, and in its stillness, you are left with the echo of your own unexamined self. That stillness is where most people turn away. They run back to the familiar drama, because in drama the noise drowns out the deeper questions. Who am I when I am not fighting for scraps? Who am I when I no longer need to prove my worth? These are the questions, the shadow fears, because they lead to individuation, the integration of your conscious and unconscious self into something whole. And wholeness leaves no room for the hooks that once kept you tethered to destruction. But to stand in that stillness, you must learn to endure the discomfort of safety. Yes, safety can be uncomfortable if you have lived too long in survival mode. The absence of chaos will feel hollow at first. You might even grieve the adrenaline rush of being needed, chased, or chosen by the very forces that diminished you. In this space, self-sabotage often arrives dressed as spontaneity. A sudden text to the one who hurt you. A small compromise of your boundary just this once. The mind will justify it as closure, forgiveness, or a final test. But understand, these are the rituals of relapse. The shadow is patient. It waits for you to slip. And if you do, it will gladly pull you back into the theater where the ending is always the same. The discipline here is not dramatic resistance, but quiet refusal. Choosing, day after day, not to water the seed of old pain. Choosing to replace the craving for external validation with the slow, steady work of self-recognition. This is the alchemy of transformation, where the energy once spent on chasing the familiar wound is redirected into building the life that the wounded self could not even imagine. In the writings of Seneca, there is a reminder. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And much is wasted when life is lived as an endless loop of hurt and apology, break and repair, longing and regret. To step out of the loop is to reclaim your time, and in reclaiming your time, you reclaim your life. One day, you will wake up and realize that the faces of your past no longer stir your blood, that their absence no longer feels like a wound, that the pain which once defined you is now a distant memory, not erased, but transformed into wisdom. And in that moment, you will know the spell is broken. Yet even when the spell breaks, there is a strange emptiness, that follows a silence where the old echoes used to live. It is tempting to fill that silence quickly, to seek new faces, new distractions, new noise to prove you have moved on. But healing does not rush. The psyche, after years of being trapped in repetition, requires space to learn a new language, the language of wholeness. This is the dangerous middle ground between the old self and the new. It is the in-between where the past can still pull you, but the future has not yet revealed itself. Many falter here because they mistake the absence of pain for the absence of life. They do not yet realize that peace is not passive. It is a foundation on which the soul can finally build without fear of collapse. In Jungian terms, this is where individuation deepens. You are no longer just resisting the old patterns, you are actively integrating the shadow. This means meeting the parts of yourself you once rejected, the anger you swallowed to keep the peace, the desires you buried to be good, the ambitions you dimmed so others would not feel small beside you. These pieces are not dangerous. They are the missing colors in your palette. And yet, integration is not romantic. It is not a cinematic epiphany. It is daily work, sometimes tedious, sometimes terrifying. It is saying no to the familiar pull, even when your chest aches for it. It is allowing grief to sit beside you without numbing it. It is recognizing when your thoughts are no longer your own, but the voice of an old wound speaking through you. You will find that people from your past, or people shaped like them, still appear. The difference is that now, you can see them clearly. Their charm no longer blinds you, because you recognize the scent of the cycle. You know the script. You can hear the subtle cues that once seduced you into silence. And in that recognition lies power. The power to choose not to step onto the stage. Stoic philosophy teaches that what is outside your control is not worth your chains. Epictetus wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This mastery is not about dominating your emotions, but about knowing when they are leading you toward the cliff's edge. Freedom, then, is not the absence of desire. It is the ability to decide whether desire is worth the cost. In this stage, your relationship with solitude transforms. Once, solitude may have felt like rejection, a void to be filled. Now, it becomes your forge. You realize that the version of you who once begged to be chosen is gone not because they were unworthy, but because you have chosen yourself with such consistency that the old hunger no longer controls you. And when the hunger fades, a new appetite emerges, not for the thrill of the chase, not for the temporary balm of another's validation, but for the kind of connections that do not require you to shrink. You find you no longer crave the high and crash of toxic intimacy, because you have tasted the slow burn of self-respect, and nothing else will do. This is the quiet turning point. The shadow is still with you, but it is no longer in control. You walk beside it now, aware of its nature, no longer afraid. And as you move forward, you begin to understand that the pain that once ruled you has become something else entirely. A compass pointing not to destruction, but to the places where you must still grow. Growth, however, is rarely graceful. It is messy, uneven, and often accompanied by the urge to retreat into what you already know. The shadow, though weakened, still has its ways, subtle invitations to slip back into old stories, sudden flashes of loneliness that make you question your resolve, moments when you long for the simplicity of letting someone else hold the pen that writes your life. But this is where the deeper transformation begins, not in the absence of temptation, but in your changed response to it. You start to notice that what once seemed irresistible now carries a weight, a taste of consequence that is impossible to ignore. It is not that the old pain loses all its sweetness. It is that you finally see the poison beneath the sugar. This clarity reshapes the way you move through the world. You stop chasing intensity for its own sake and start looking for resonance, the rare alignment between truth and connection. You realize that real intimacy is not found in the whirlwind that sweeps you off your feet, but in the steady ground that allows you to stand taller. And as you stand taller, your posture changes in ways others can feel. There is less urgency in your speech, less desperation in your presence. People sense that you are not scanning the horizon for someone to complete you. You are already whole. This wholeness is magnetic in a way the old hunger never was, because it draws those who are not threatened by your strength. Yet wholeness does not mean you are untouchable. It means you are unafraid of being touched by love, by loss, by life itself, because you trust yourself to hold steady in the storm. It is here that the teachings of Marcus Aurelius come alive. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You stop bargaining with the uncontrollable and begin cultivating what has always been within your reach: your own perception, your own choices, your own presence. There will be moments when you are tested. The past may knock at your door wearing a new face. Someone may speak to the oldest part of you, the one that still aches for recognition, still remembers what it felt like to be chosen, even by the wrong hands. But now, instead of stepping inside the old house, you pause at the threshold. You see the dust in the corners, the cracks in the walls, the smell of air that has never known freedom, and you know you cannot live there anymore. This is not rejection. It is release. Release of the belief that you must earn love. Release of the narrative that says pain is proof of passion. Release of the chains you once polished so they would look like jewelry. And in that release, something unexpected happens. You begin to forgive. Not in the shallow sense of pretending it never happened, but in the deep sense of freeing yourself from the need for repayment. You no longer keep a ledger of wounds because you are no longer in the business of debt. Forgiveness here is not for them. It is for the part of you that once didn't know any better, the self that kept choosing the flame, thinking it was the sun. You take that self by the hand and lead them forward, not with pity, but with gratitude. They carried you as far as they could. Now it is time to walk into the life they could not yet imagine. And when you step into that life, it does not greet you with fanfare. There is no dramatic swell of music, no sudden epiphany that erases the years. Instead, it comes quietly like dawn breaking through a window you forgot to close. The light creeps in slowly, almost shy. But once you notice it, you realize it has been there for some time, waiting for you to turn your head. This is the rebirth that no one tells you about. Not a single defining moment, but a gradual awakening into your own presence. You begin to live without the constant hum of anticipation, without scanning the horizon for the next disappointment. Life stops feeling like a series of traps and starts feeling like open ground. And in this open ground, you are no longer defined by what was done to you. The shadow still walks with you, but now it is a companion rather than a captor. It speaks, but you choose when to listen. It warns, but it no longer commands. You have learned its language, and in learning it, you have robbed it of its power to deceive you. There is a lightness here, not because you have avoided pain, but because you are no longer shackled to it. You understand that pain is inevitable, but suffering is voluntary. The old patterns depended on your participation, and now you have withdrawn from the game. It is in this space that your relationships change most profoundly. You stop chasing intensity and start cultivating depth. You are drawn to those who do not demand your diminishment, who do not mistake your self-sufficiency for arrogance, who are not afraid to meet you in the stillness you have learned to love. And because you no longer barter with your worth, the connections you build are no longer fragile. From the outside, it may seem as though you have simply moved on. But what has truly happened is far more radical. You have severed the unconscious tether to your old identity. You have stepped out of the narrative where love was conditional, where validation was earned through sacrifice. And in doing so, you have opened the door to a life where your presence is enough. This is emotional freedom, not the absence of feeling, but the sovereignty over it. You no longer fear solitude because it is no longer a verdict against you. It is a sanctuary you carry within. You no longer chase closure because you understand that closure is not something they give you, it is something you decide. And you no longer need the world to witness your healing for it to be real, because you have become the witness yourself. Here, the silence that once terrified you becomes your proof. You are not waiting for a message that will never come, not rehearsing speeches you will never give. The quiet is no longer empty. It is full of your own voice, your own clarity, your own certainty. And when you look back not to reopen the wound, but to acknowledge the path you see, that every step, even the missteps, brought you here. The pain that once destroyed you has been transmuted into strength, the longing into vision, the shadow into light. You have chosen differently, again and again, until the choice became your nature. You have walked out of the fire and built a life that does not require burning. Now, you stand in the center of yourself, untethered, unafraid. No one can take this from you. No one ever will.